Assalamu alaikum to the Muslims and peace be upon you to the non-Muslims. Someone had asked me in my video where I described why I left my original religion, why I didn't consider becoming a Christian. So I wanted to kind of just briefly explain my encounters with Christianity. And I want to briefly just get Catholicism out of the way. I never really considered Catholicism because I think that as an official church, it has too many questions to answer and too many problems to deal with, like the Inquisition and selling of indulgences and things like that, which an informal religion would not have to deal with because it wasn't an established institution. So, but as the papacy is supposed to be from God and is supposed to have some moral authority, I think if you're Catholic, you kind of have to explain everything bad that's happened, and I don't think you can. But as far as mainstream Christianity goes, my first encounter with that was when I was in high school. I had a friend who was an evangelical Christian, and she kind of told me that I was going to go to hell. And I asked her why, and she said, because I hadn't accepted Jesus. And I said, well, yeah, I did. And she said, no, you didn't really mean it. And she had a sister who was having a baby out of wedlock. And I said, what about your sister? You know, I have never done anything like that. And your sister's going to have a baby. What about her? And she was like, well, she's accepted Jesus. Well, you have not. So that was my first encounter. So the second encounter that I had was when I was in the army. I went to a Protestant service during basic training because I couldn't go to my church for the first week. And it was kind of in a big auditorium. Everyone was kind of singing and crying and acting really weird. And it just seemed kind of like a concert, and it didn't really feel very spiritual to me, so I really didn't like it. And so when I left my original religion, I didn't really even consider becoming a Christian because I didn't like how, and I thought this was a universal doctrine, but I guess there's some dispute. But I thought that everyone believed that as soon as you accept Jesus, then you're guaranteed to go to heaven and you don't have to do anything for it. And I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really have anything to do with what it says in the Bible. And it seems like it leads people to do whatever they want, which is what they do because we're human beings. And also, I have a problem with the idea that Christians, at least where I live, are politically conservative. If you read the New Testament, you would think that everyone who's Christian is a poor, people-loving, war-hating kind of crowd, and they're quite the opposite, it turns out. You know, it seems like they want war more than anyone. Seems like they complain about taxes and people living off of other people and things like that more than anyone else, and doesn't really make any sense. I knew a woman who belonged to a group called Food Not Bombs, and she fed homeless people every single day, and she used to own a restaurant. She would wake up every morning and they got food donated to them by the stores, and they would cook. She would cook, and she would give everyone a nice cooked meal every day. And I used to go and talk to the homeless people, and they told me about how their lives were and how they were treated, and it was just very difficult. Most of them had drug or alcohol problems, but it was usually after they had become homeless, and they had to spend their nights walking around because if they stopped somewhere they were liable to get harassed or beaten by the police. And then they would try to find a place to sleep during the day, and that they were also liable to get harassed but less likely to be beaten But, my friend was eventually arrested for her charity, along with one of her friends. And that's the kind of climate that we live in Christian America. In contrast to that, when I met my family in Lebanon, they were the most humble, sweet, generous, kind, loving people. During the Lebanon War in 2006, which, if you don't know about it, I'm going to post a slideshow that I made at the time. I wasn't Muslim then, and it was really horrible for me, very traumatic. I was really upset. I couldn't stand the idea that bombs were falling and there were people that I loved there and I couldn't do anything about it. One day, I screamed in my car when I was alone and I cried a lot. But I was able to get a hold of my mother-in-law once during the war, and she lived in the South, so she'd had to escape. They had stayed for about a week and a half, and buildings were bombed around them, and so eventually they decided to leave. It took them 3 days to make a trip that usually should take 2 or 3 hours. And I talked to her, and she didn't complain at all. She totally put her faith and trust in God. She was more concerned about me than she was concerned about herself. And I just can't imagine that when I see people around me. I can't imagine that kind of reaction from someone I know here. And also my father-in-law, who passed away before the war, he was a prisoner in a torture prison camp in southern Lebanon called Qiyam. And he was tortured for 2 years while his children were young. And I asked him what he thought about Israelis, and he said, well, it's just like anywhere. There's good people and there's bad people. And compare that to John McCain, who, as late as 8 years ago, said that he'll always hate the gooks. And I just thought it was remarkably magnanimous, and he was totally at peace with himself and the world. And so that's really what first got me interested in Islam, were the people that I met and the way that they were. And I've since met so many good Muslims I can't even describe. I just love to be around Muslims. I love to spend my time talking to them, being with them, because I feel totally at peace and happy and accepted, and it's just a feeling like I don't have anywhere else. Assalamu alaikum.